I never thought that saving my sister's life would nearly cost me my own. The night I saw Nurse Evelyn standing at my door, trembling, whispering that I had to run before Olivia returned, my world cracked in half. But to understand why those words hit me like a blow to the chest, I have to take you back to the beginning, to the life that looked perfect from the outside but was already poisoned at its roots. My name is Rachel Morgan. I am 32 years old, and I work as a nurse's aide in Denver. My life has been simple, sometimes too quiet, but at least it was mine. I had carved out my own corner of peace after years of living under the heavy shadow of my father, Mark Morgan, a man who ruled our home with iron fists and sharp words. He believed that daughters existed only to serve, and he always made sure I knew that I was the lesser one, the weaker one, the daughter he tolerated only because my mother loved me. My mother is gone now. I still remember the sound of her cries behind the locked bedroom door, the way she tried to shield me when Mark's anger turned physical, the way her eyes dimmed more each year until the day her heart gave out. My father said it was natural, but I always believed it was his cruelty that broke her. After she died, Olivia became his jewel, his pride, his only real child. She was 3 years older than me, beautiful, charismatic, with a smile that charmed teachers and neighbors. He adored her, defended her, placed her on a pedestal so high that I could barely breathe in her shadow. And Olivia knew it. She wore that favoritism like a crown and a weapon. She could do no wrong, and I could do no right. If she failed a class, it was because she was sick. If I got straight A's, it was never enough. If she lashed out, it was passion. If I spoke back, it was disrespect. That was the pattern of my childhood, a rhythm of neglect and gaslighting that carved itself into my bones. When Olivia was diagnosed with leukemia at 12, my father acted as if the sun itself had dimmed. Every conversation, every decision, every ounce of money went to her treatment. I was invisible, but I swallowed my pain because she was my sister, and she was suffering. That was the first time I learned that my existence would always be measured by what I could give to her. Years later, when I finally managed to move out, I told myself I was free. I built my independence, studied nursing, paid my own bills, found pride in helping strangers who needed care. Still, part of me ached for family, for acceptance, for a sister who might one day see me as more than a shadow. Then came the phone call that shattered that fragile peace. Olivia, now 35, her voice dripping with urgency and entitlement, told me her leukemia had returned. She said she needed me, not my comfort, not my presence, my marrow. Her doctor had already checked the registry, and I was the only match. I remember gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles went white. I wanted to say no. I wanted to scream that I was tired of being her lifeline while she mocked me, but then came my father's voice, harsh and commanding, echoing from the background. "You will save your sister. You owe her everything. If she dies, it will be on your head." I felt my chest tighten, the old fear flooding back, and I said yes. I told myself it was because it was the right thing to do, because no matter what she had done, she was still my sister. But deep down, I knew I had no choice. Saying no in my family never existed as an option. The day of the procedure, I looked at Olivia lying in the hospital bed, pale, but still managing to smirk at me. She said, "Finally useful." The words sliced into me more sharply than any scalpel could. I told myself she was scared that people say cruel things when they face death. But something in her eyes made me shiver, a coldness that did not match the fragility of her body. The doctor said it was a success. Everyone congratulated her bravery. My father cried tears of joy and clutched her hand, ignoring me completely. I sat in the corner, exhausted, sore, dizzy from the donation, and utterly invisible. That was the day I learned a truth I could not yet accept. Sacrifice does not always earn love. Sometimes it paints a target on your back. I walked out of that hospital believing I had given her life again. I did not know that I had just placed my own life into her hands, hands that would soon tighten into a fist I could not escape. The first week after the transplant should have been about recovery, about healing and slowly regaining my strength, but instead it became the beginning of my decline. At first, I thought the weakness, the nausea, the endless headaches were just the price of what I had given, but the heaviness in my body did not feel normal. I had cared for patients before I had seen the side effects of procedures, and something about mine felt wrong. The dizziness was relentless, and sometimes when I stood up, the world spun so violently that I had to clutch the nearest wall just to stay upright. Olivia, on the other hand, looked radiant. Her cheeks filled with color. Within days, her energy returned with startling speed, and she would walk into my room with a mocking smile as if to remind me who had really won. She insisted on handling my medications. She would bring me pills in small cups of water, her tone dripping with fake concern. "Drink up, little sister, you need to stay strong for me." At first, I obeyed without question, but then I noticed the pills tasted bitter metallic, different from the ones the hospital had prescribed. One night, when my head was pounding so badly I could hardly keep my eyes open, she pressed the cup into my hand, and I saw a fine residue at the bottom when I finished. I asked her what it was, and her eyes narrowed with impatience. "Do not be paranoid, Rachel," she snapped. "You are always so suspicious, always imagining things." "It is exhausting." Her voice carried the same tone our father used whenever I tried to defend myself as a child. Still, something inside me twisted. My instincts whispered that I was being made weaker, not stronger. I tried to check the bottles, but she kept them locked in the cabinet, telling me it was for my own safety. When I pressed, my father stormed into the room, his face red with fury. "Enough, Rachel," he barked. "You will not accuse your sister after she almost died. She is the reason you even have a purpose in this family. Stop inventing drama." I wanted to scream, to tell him that I felt poison sliding down my throat, but his eyes burned with the same rage I remembered from childhood, and my voice failed. My body trembled with a mixture of illness and fear, and in that moment, I realized nothing had changed. I was still the scapegoat, still the disposable daughter. The next day, I forced myself to eat breakfast at the table, though I felt like collapsing. Olivia sat across from me, perfectly dressed, sipping coffee as if she had never been sick at all. She looked up, caught my gaze, and smirked. Finally useful, she whispered again the words like acid dripping into my ears. My stomach turned, and I excused myself quickly, stumbling back to bed. As I lay there, I thought about the years of silence, the countless times I had swallowed humiliation for the sake of peace. Now, lying in my own room with my head spinning and my stomach burning, I realized peace was never what they wanted from me. They wanted submission. And Olivia was no longer content with my invisibility. She wanted me broken. The suspicion grew heavier each day, pressing down on me like a weight I could not throw off. Each pill tasted sharper. Each sip of water seemed tainted. Each look from Olivia told me she enjoyed watching me wither. My father's scorn sealed it. He blamed me for my own illness, for doubting Olivia, for being too weak. The cycle of abuse had not ended with my mother's death. It had only shifted forms, grown more sophisticated. And in my weakness, I could feel something far darker brewing beneath the surface, a plan I was not yet ready to see. It was close to midnight when the knock came sharp and hurried, the kind of knock that makes your heart leap before your mind can catch up. I was lying in bed, sweating from another wave of nausea, the room spinning even though I had not moved. My father had gone to sleep hours earlier, muttering about how I was a burden and Olivia was the only child worth his effort. Olivia herself had gone out claiming she needed to meet a friend, though her smirk told me she was up to something else. The knock came again faster, and I dragged myself to the door, every muscle screaming. When I opened it, the sight before me froze the breath in my lungs. Nurse Evelyn Carter stood on my porch, the same nurse who had assisted in Olivia's treatments. But she did not look composed or professional. She looked terrified. Her hands trembled as she clutched a folder, her eyes darting around as if someone might be watching. Her voice broke when she whispered, "Run before she returns." I stared at her, unable to understand. "What are you talking about?" I asked, my throat dry. Evelyn stepped closer, lowered her voice until it was almost a hiss. "You are not sick from the transplant. You are being poisoned." My knees nearly buckled. She shoved the folder into my hands. Inside were printed test results, medical reports I could barely focus on through the haze of my dizziness. but one line stood out highlighted in yellow foreign chemical compounds detected unrelated to transplant medications. I looked up at her, my mind reeling. Evelyn explained in a rush, "I saw your blood work. I saw the compounds. They are not supposed to be there. Someone has been slipping toxins into your meds." My stomach turned violently as the pieces slammed together. The bitter taste, the residue, the locked cabinet, the way Olivia insisted on controlling my pills. "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "She is my sister." Evelyn's eyes filled with pity and urgency. She leaned closer. "Rachel, listen to me. I should not be here. If anyone finds out I came, I could lose my job worse. But I could not sleep knowing what I saw. You need to get away from her. Before she returns, you need to run." My hands shook as I clutched the folder. My world tilted not just from illness, but from the sickening realization that the person I had nearly died to save was deliberately trying to erase me. I thought of my mother, of the nights she whispered that love does not have to hurt, that family is supposed to protect. And then I thought of Olivia's smirk, her cold words, and my father's blind adoration. The bile rose in my throat. Evelyn touched my arm, her grip surprisingly firm for someone trembling. "Do not confront her yet. Gather proof. Protect yourself. And for God's sake, keep this hidden." She glanced over her shoulder, fear etched into every line of her face. Then she turned and hurried back down the steps, disappearing into the night. I closed the door with shaking hands and pressed my back against it, my chest heaving. The silence of the house pressed in on me thick and suffocating. I opened the folder again, forcing my blurred vision to focus on the numbers and terms. I was trained enough to recognize what they meant. Toxic compounds levels consistent with long-term exposure. My pulse thundered in my ears. I stumbled to the bathroom, turned on the light, and stared at my reflection. My face was pale, my eyes sunken, my skin clammy. I had believed I was simply recovering slowly, but now I saw the truth. I was being broken down piece by piece, and Olivia was the one holding the hammer. My stomach lurched, and I fell to my knees, retching until tears streamed down my cheeks. When I could finally breathe, I whispered into the empty room, "Why? Why would she do this after I gave her life again?" But the answer was already echoing inside me, because to Olivia, my life had always been expendable, because my father had always taught her that she was the chosen one, the one worth saving, the one who deserved everything, and I was nothing more than the shadow to be erased. As I crawled back to my bed folder clutched to my chest, a terrible certainty settled over me. My life was no longer just in danger. It was already slipping through my fingers, and the person I had trusted with my blood was the one pouring poison into my veins. The folder Evelyn gave me did not just contain test results. When my hands stopped shaking long enough to turn the pages, I found a note clipped to the back, signed by Dr. Henry Lawson, Olivia's oncologist. My heart clenched as I read his words. Concerns remain regarding patient Olivia Morgan's prior claims and medical history. Evidence of possible insurance fraud during previous remission periods. Recommendation further investigation. I stared at the page, my pulse racing. Insurance fraud. False claims. Had Olivia manipulated the system, feigned illness, taken money meant for real patients? My breath caught as another memory surfaced, the way she always demanded I sign papers. Co-sign loans cover expenses in my name. I thought it was desperation, the scramble of a sick woman fighting for her life. But what if it had been manipulation all along? The thought sent a chill straight through me. I flipped another page and found handwritten notes from Dr. Lawson observations he had never meant me to see. Patient shows signs of exaggerating symptoms. Test inconsistencies. Pattern suggests possible deception. My stomach turned. She might never have been as sick as she claimed. Maybe she had played everyone, even me, even my father, twisting her story until we bent to her will. My fingers tightened on the folder until the paper crumpled. My mind flashed back to nights at the kitchen table when she shoved bills across to me and ordered me to sign. She would say, "You owe me, Rachel. Without me, you would be nothing." My father would stand behind her, looming, his voice booming. "Do as your sister says. She deserves everything we have." I used to believe I was helping, that I was being dutiful. Now I saw the pattern for what it was: years of financial and emotional exploitation. My throat burned with unshed tears. I wanted to scream, to tear the folder apart, but I forced myself to keep reading. The more I knew, the stronger I could be. Buried at the bottom was another sheet barely a paragraph long in Dr. Lawson's tight script. Recommend patient family be alerted discreetly. Risk factors high. Pattern suggests predatory behavior rather than genuine recovery needs. Predatory behavior. The words blurred as my vision swam. My sister, the one I had bled for, was not a victim. She was a predator, and I was her prey. I pressed the folder to my chest, rocking slightly, trying to breathe through the nausea and terror. Memories crashed over me of my father telling me I owed Olivia my life, of Olivia sneering when I hesitated, of the countless times I was told that love meant sacrifice. But love is not supposed to feel like this. Love is not supposed to leave you poisoned in your own bed. My fists clenched. For a moment, despair threatened to drown me, but then a spark ignited beneath the weight. If she had deceived doctors, stolen from insurers, manipulated our father, and now was slowly killing me, then she was not invincible. Predators always slip. And if Evelyn risked her career to bring me this evidence, then I was not entirely alone. That realization steadied me even as my stomach churned. The fear remained sharp and consuming, but beneath it, something else stirred. Anger. Not the fleeting frustration I had buried for years, but a deep, rising anger that filled my veins, stronger than any poison Olivia could slip me. I closed the folder, slowly wiped my damp cheeks, and whispered into the empty room, "You will not erase me." For the first time in years, I felt the faint pulse of defiance. The day I saw the mask slip from Olivia's face was the day every suspicion hardened into truth. I woke late in the morning, my head heavy, my stomach raw. I forced myself out of bed because something inside me whispered that I had to watch her, that I could not let myself be blind another second. I crept down the hall, careful not to let the floorboards creak. The kitchen door was cracked open. I held my breath and peered through. Olivia stood at the counter, her back to me, humming softly, a tune far too cheerful for someone supposedly battling leukemia. On the counter lay my prescription bottles, and in her hand she held a small packet of fine white powder. I watched as she poured the powder into the glass she had set aside for me, stirring it with deliberate care, her movements practiced. She looked over her shoulder, once her expression sharp, calculating, before she placed the cup neatly on the tray she used to bring me my medication. My skin crawled. My breath caught in my throat. I had no medical training to explain what the powder was, but I knew in my gut it was killing me. The confirmation hit me like ice water down my spine. I stepped back too quickly, the floor creaked, and Olivia turned. Her eyes locked onto mine. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Her lips curved into a slow, sinister smile. "Well, little sister, awake at last?" she said, her voice honeyed venom. I forced myself to stand taller, though my legs trembled. "What are you putting in my medicine?" I asked, my voice shaking. She laughed low and cruel. "Do you really think you are clever enough to question me? You are alive only because of me. You gave me your marrow, and now your only value is keeping quiet." I stared at her, stunned. Her words were not even an attempt to deny. She had exposed herself, certain of her power. My father's footsteps thundered from the hall. He stormed into the kitchen, his face twisted with rage. "What nonsense is this?" he roared. "Rachel, you will not accuse your sister again. She is your blood. She deserves your loyalty." I wanted to scream the truth, to point to the glass, to force him to see, but Olivia's smirk grew wider, as if daring me. My voice broke. "She is poisoning me," I whispered. For a heartbeat, I thought he might waver, but then his hand slammed against the table. "Enough! If you dare accuse her again, you will leave this house. You shame your mother's memory with these lies." The sting of those words struck deeper than any blow. Shame your mother's memory. He had used my grief as a weapon, just as he had all my life. Olivia leaned against the counter, utterly relaxed, knowing he was on her side. Her eyes gleamed with triumph. "See?" she said lightly. "Even father knows your place. You are nothing but a shadow." My chest ached with rage and despair. Tears blurred my vision, but I refused to let them fall where she could see. I turned and walked away, but inside something shifted. The mask had cracked. The carefully painted image of the frail patient, the beloved daughter, was gone. In its place stood the predator Evelyn's note had warned me about, and my father, the man who should have protected me, had revealed himself as her accomplice, blind in his devotion, cruel in his dismissal. That night, I lay in my room, my body weak, but my mind burning. The folder rested under my pillow, Evelyn's whispered warning echoing in my ears. I replayed the scene in the kitchen over and over. Olivia's smile, my father's fury, the poisoned glass waiting for me on the counter. They thought I would crumble, that I would accept my fate as I always had. But for the first time, I felt a different kind of fear. Not the paralyzing terror of a child cowering from her father's blows, but the sharp, galvanizing fear that sparks into determination. If Olivia could not even bother to deny it, if she flaunted her power openly, then she believed herself untouchable. That arrogance would be her undoing. I curled onto my side, whispering to myself, "You will not erase me." The words grew stronger with each repetition. By dawn, they had become a vow. I barely slept that night, my mind pacing in circles like a caged animal. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Olivia's smirk, the white powder sinking into my water, my father's furious face dismissing me as if I were dirt under his shoe. Fear clawed at me, but beneath it, something hotter rose. For the first time in years, I felt the burn of rage, stronger than my terror. If I stayed silent, if I kept swallowing poison and pretending it was medicine, I would be dead within weeks. My sister would own everything my father would praise her, and the last trace of me would vanish without anyone questioning why. That thought steadied me. I could not let my mother's warnings be wasted. "Love does not have to hurt," she used to whisper. "Protect yourself even if no one else will." By morning, I knew I had to fight back, but not with screams or accusations. Screaming at Olivia only fed her power. No, I had to do what she least expected. I had to be quiet. I had to be clever. I needed a plan. The next day, I called Evelyn from a payphone near the grocery store, my voice trembling. She answered on the second ring. When I told her it was me, she gasped. "Rachel, are you safe?" I whispered that I was for now, but I needed more than whispers. I needed help gathering proof. She hesitated, reminding me that if anyone traced her back to me, she could lose her license. I told her I understood, but I could hear the resolve in her voice when she finally said, "Meet me tonight at the clinic parking lot." When darkness fell, I slipped out, telling my father I needed air. He barely looked up, too busy watching Olivia laugh at some joke on television. Outside, the cool night air steadied me. In the shadows of the clinic, Evelyn handed me a small bag. Inside were a tiny camera, a recorder, and sterile vials for collecting samples. My hands shook as I took them. She touched my shoulder. "You have to be cautious. Pretend you trust her. Let her think you are still weak. Gather what you can. Bring it to me, and I will make sure it gets to the right people." Tears stung my eyes at her bravery. She was risking everything, but she believed me. That belief lit something in me I thought I had lost. I hugged her quickly and hurried back before Olivia noticed my absence. Over the next days, I began my performance. I dragged my feet when I walked. I let my voice quiver. I pretended the pills she gave me knocked me into oblivion. I forced myself to swallow them, but only after I found ways to spit the residue into tissues when she was not looking. I hid those tissues in a sealed bag under my mattress, knowing one day they would speak for me when no one else would. At night, I slipped the tiny camera into corners of the kitchen, into the shelf where she kept the bottles, locked into the hallway where she made her calls. I caught her pouring powder into cups, whispering on the phone to someone I did not know, laughing softly when she mentioned my name. Each recording fueled my determination. Each sample collected gave me strength. Yet the act of pretending nearly broke me. Sitting at the table, listening to her fake concern, hearing my father tell me again and again that I was ungrateful, required a silence that scraped my insides raw. Sometimes I clenched my fists so tightly under the table that my nails drew blood. I reminded myself it was worth it, that every moment of humiliation was ammunition for the day I would finally turn the tables. One evening, Olivia leaned against the doorway of my room, watching me with calculating eyes. "You look worse every day," she said. "Perhaps soon you will not even need medicine." I forced a weak smile, lowering my gaze, letting her think I was fading. Inside, I was memorizing every inflection of her voice, every detail of her cruelty. My father passed behind her, shaking his head at me. "She is your only hope," he muttered. "Without her, you would not even be alive." The lie cut me, but I kept my mask in place. Later that night, I sat by my window, clutching the recorder, whispering into it the details of every interaction, every word. I knew one day someone would need to hear my voice if I could not speak for myself. But I was not ready to surrender. I also knew I needed someone outside my fragile circle of allies, someone who could act quickly if things collapsed. That was when I turned to our neighbor, Mr. Daniels, a retired firefighter who had always nodded kindly when he saw me in the yard. I caught him one afternoon while Olivia was away. My voice shook as I asked if he would do me a favor, one I could not fully explain. I told him that if he ever heard me shout the word thunder, he had to call the police immediately. He frowned, confused, but when he saw the desperation in my eyes, he nodded slowly. "Consider it done, Rachel," he said. I walked back into my house with my heart pounding, a strange comfort settling in my chest. For the first time, I had a safety net beyond whispers and hidden cameras. I had a signal, a lifeline. That night, lying in the darkness, I whispered to myself again, "You will not erase me." This time, it did not sound like a plea. It sounded like a promise. 3 days. That was all the time I had left. I discovered it by accident when I slipped into Olivia's room while she was out shopping with my father. On her dresser lay a neatly folded letter half hidden beneath a scarf. I pulled it free and read the bold heading, "Appointment for Estate Revision." The words blurred as my heart slammed against my ribs. It was scheduled for 3 days later at a law office downtown. My father's name was listed as a witness. I scanned further and found my own name crossed out, replaced with Olivia as sole heir. My legs buckled and I gripped the dresser for balance. She was not waiting for me to die slowly. She was planning to erase me, officially cutting me from every record, every inheritance, every claim to the home that was once my mother's sanctuary. Fury burned hotter than fear. I slipped the paper into my pocket and hurried back to my room before she returned. That night, I pretended to be half asleep when Olivia knocked and walked in carrying a document. She set it on my lap, her eyes glittering. "Sign this." "Rachel," she said, "it is a transfer. This house, the bank account Mother left, everything will be secure with me." I stared at the lines of legal jargon, my hands trembling. "Why?" I whispered. Her smile widened, cruel and mocking. "Because you are fading. You know it. I know it. Why prolong the inevitable? Better to leave everything to someone who can handle it." My chest tightened as I whispered, "What if I do not sign?" Her expression hardened. "Then perhaps I stop giving you your pain medicine. Perhaps I let you suffer in silence until you beg me." My stomach twisted. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "You are weak, Rachel. Always weak. But you can do one useful thing before you disappear. Sign." She pressed the pen into my hand. For a moment, despair nearly swallowed me, but I forced my eyes to droop, my breath to rasp. I nodded slowly, letting her believe I was yielding. I scrawled something across the paper, deliberately messy, illegible. She snatched it up and smirked. "Good girl," she said, brushing my hair back as if I were a child. When she left, I vomited into the wastebasket, trembling with both rage and relief. I had not surrendered. I had bought time. Time I would use to strike. The next morning, I called Evelyn again from the grocery store payphone. I told her what I had found, my voice urgent. She told me to gather everything, every recording, every sample, and she would connect me with someone who could act. That night, I spread the evidence across my bed. Tissue samples sealed in bags, tiny camera clips of Olivia pouring powder into glasses, recordings of her laughing about me to someone over the phone. I copied everything onto a flash drive, my hands shaking with both terror and determination. Then I drafted a letter sealing the flash drive inside, addressed to Prosecutor Linda Chavez, whose reputation for taking on fraud and abuse cases was well known in Denver. I mailed it the next day, my heart pounding as the envelope slid into the slot. By the time Olivia discovered what I had done, it would be too late. Still, fear gnawed at me. If she realized, she would not wait for signatures or documents. She would finish me. Each tick of the clock became louder, each glance she cast at me sharper. My father hovered near her, constantly praising her resilience, scolding me for being ungrateful. Every word he spoke deepened my resolve. He was blind, but I would make the world see. The countdown raced in my veins. On the second day, Olivia reminded me of the appointment. "Be ready to come with us," she ordered. "I want you there to witness me take what is mine." Her arrogance nearly made me laugh. She thought I was still powerless, still the weak little sister who would bend. But my silence had become my weapon, my weakness a disguise. I looked at her with glassy eyes and whispered, "Whatever you want, Olivia." She patted my cheek with mock affection. "Good. Soon this nightmare will be over." She was right, but not in the way she imagined. That night, I whispered to the dark, 3 more days. Hold on, 3 more days. Every nerve in my body felt stretched to breaking, but beneath the fear was steel. I was no longer waiting to be saved. I was preparing to save myself. The morning of the appointment arrived with a weight so heavy I thought it might crush me before I even left my bed. My stomach churned, my head throbbed, and my chest felt tight, but beneath the illness a strange calm had taken root. This was it. The day my sister had chosen as my erasure would instead become her unmasking. I slipped the small recorder into the lining of my purse, checked once more that my flash drive had already been mailed, and forced myself to move slowly, carefully, as if I were still too weak to do anything more than obey. Olivia swept into my room just after 9, dressed in an elegant navy suit that made her look more like a business executive than a recovering patient. She smiled with a gleam of triumph that turned my stomach. "Ready, little sister," she said brightly. "Father is already in the car." I nodded weakly, pretending to lean heavily on the doorframe. She watched me with satisfaction, clearly convinced that I was too frail to pose any threat. As we drove downtown, my father rambled about responsibility, about how proud he was of Olivia's strength. He never looked at me, not once. I sat in the back seat, my hands clenched in my lap, whispering silently to myself, "Hold on. Soon." When we arrived at the law office, the receptionist ushered us into a sleek conference room. The long, polished table gleamed under the lights, documents stacked neatly at one end. The attorney, a gray-haired man in a dark suit, greeted us politely and explained the procedure. Olivia sat tall, her chin lifted with pride. My father hovered beside her, his hand on her shoulder. I lowered myself into a chair at the opposite end, every nerve alive with tension. The attorney began reading aloud, his voice droning through the clauses and revisions. My name appeared once only to be crossed out, replaced by Olivia in bold letters. My throat tightened, but I forced myself to wait. At last, the attorney slid the papers across the table toward me. "Miss Morgan, as the other surviving child, your acknowledgement is required here." Olivia's eyes burned into me, daring me to resist. My father's glare warned of the consequences if I disobeyed. My hand hovered above the pen, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure they could hear it. Then I drew a slow breath, lifted my chin, and said, "Before I sign anything, I think you should all see this." I reached into my purse, pulled out the small tablet I had hidden there, and tapped play. The screen lit up, filling the quiet room with the grainy video from my hidden camera. Olivia at the kitchen counter pouring powder into my glass, her face calm, deliberate. Olivia on the phone, whispering, "She will not last much longer." Olivia laughing softly, saying, "Once she is gone, everything will be mine." Gasps filled the room. The attorney's eyes widened. My father surged to his feet, his face pale. Olivia's composure cracked, her eyes flashing with panic before she slammed her fist onto the table. "That is a fake!" she shouted. She turned to the attorney, her voice rising. "She doctored it. She has always been jealous of me." But before he could respond, the door opened and Nurse Evelyn Carter and Dr. Lawson stepped inside. Both carried files thick with evidence. Evelyn's voice was steady as she addressed the room. "Those recordings are authentic. We verified Rachel's blood work. She has been systematically poisoned." Dr. Lawson added, "And Olivia's medical history shows inconsistencies, including suspected insurance fraud." My father turned to Olivia, his voice breaking. "Tell me it is not true." For the first time, she faltered. Her mouth opened, but no words came. Then rage twisted her features. She lunged across the table toward me, grabbing the pen like a weapon, her arm raised. The attorney shouted in shock. My chair scraped backward as she bore down on me, eyes blazing with fury. In that instant, I thought I might die right there in the law office, but before the pen could strike, the conference room door burst open. Police officers flooded in, weapons drawn, commanded by Prosecutor Linda Chavez herself. Mr. Daniels had kept his word, having called the police the moment I gave him the signal outside the building earlier that morning. The officers pulled Olivia back, twisting her arms behind her as she screamed, "Let me go! She is lying! She has always been lying!" The room crackled with chaos. My father staggered against the wall, his face ashen, muttering, "My daughter! My daughter!" But the mask was gone. The truth was laid bare for all to see. Olivia was no victim. She was a predator caught in the act. The attorney stared at me in stunned silence. Prosecutor Chavez stepped forward, her voice firm. "Olivia Morgan, you are under arrest for attempted murder, fraud, and conspiracy. You have the right to remain silent." Olivia shrieked, twisting in their grip, her eyes burning with hatred as they met mine. "You will regret this, Rachel. You always ruin everything." I straightened slowly, my body trembling but my voice steady. "No, Olivia." This time I saved myself. The words left my lips with a finality that silenced even her screams. As the officers dragged her from the room, Evelyn came to my side, steadying me. Dr. Lawson placed the file of evidence on the attorney's desk. Prosecutor Chavez assured me the case was airtight, that Olivia's own arrogance had sealed her fate. My father sank into a chair, his hands covering his face. He whispered broken apologies, but I could not look at him. He had chosen his idol for too long. He had refused to see me, and now he had to face what his blindness had wrought. The adrenaline that had carried me began to fade, leaving me weak and trembling. But inside, I felt something I had not felt in years: vindication. They had tried to erase me. Instead, in front of witnesses, law and truth, I had erased the lies. The hours after Olivia's arrest passed in a blur of flashing lights, stern voices, and the rustle of papers being seized as evidence. I sat in a stiff chair at the police precinct, Evelyn at my side, while detectives asked me to recount every detail. I told them everything: the bitter taste of the pills, the residue, the hidden cameras, the tissue samples, the threats. She whispered when she thought no one could hear. Each word felt like opening an old wound, but each wound became a weapon now turned against the woman who had tried to bury me alive. Across the room, I caught a glimpse of my father sitting slumped, his hands shackled by guilt, though not by steel. He was not under arrest, but the look in his eyes told me he was imprisoned all the same. When an officer asked if I wanted to press charges against him for complicity, I hesitated. He had defended her, enabled her, and condemned me with his words. But I knew his punishment was already carved into his soul, to watch the daughter he adored unmasked as a criminal and the daughter he scorned rise in truth. For once, silence was enough. The next weeks moved quickly, as if justice had been waiting just beyond the door all along. Prosecutor Linda Chavez built the case with relentless precision. She presented the recordings, the samples Evelyn had verified, the files from Dr. Lawson, the forged documents Olivia had prepared for the estate transfer. Each piece tightened the noose. Olivia's lawyer tried to paint me as unstable, claimed I was jealous that I had manufactured evidence to ruin my sister, but when the jury watched the videos of her pouring powder into my glass, heard her own voice saying, "I would not last long. There was no room for doubt." Evelyn testified with quiet strength, describing the risk she took to warn me. Dr. Lawson explained the inconsistencies in Olivia's medical history, the patterns of deception that now looked deliberate. Mr. Daniels described the signal I gave him and the call he made that brought the police racing to the law office. Together, their voices formed a shield around me, proof that I had not been imagining the nightmare. My father was called to the stand. His voice broke as he admitted he had dismissed my pleas that he had believed Olivia's lies because it was easier than seeing the truth. His words trembled with regret. I wanted to hate him, but watching his shoulders sag under the weight of his failure, I realized he was already broken. When Olivia took the stand, she tried to summon the mask again. She smiled sweetly, called me confused, fragile, claimed she had only ever tried to care for me. But then the prosecutor played the recording of her saying, "Better to leave everything to someone who can handle it." The courtroom fell silent, the weight of her cruelty echoing in the stillness. I stared at her, my stomach twisting, because even then she did not flinch. She believed herself the victim, even as the world saw her for what she was. The jury deliberated less than 4 hours. The verdict was guilty on all counts: attempted murder, fraud, financial abuse, conspiracy. When the judge pronounced a sentence of 25 years in prison, Olivia's face finally cracked. Rage contorted her features as she shouted at me across the courtroom. "You think you have won, Rachel! You think this makes you better than me! But you will always be nothing!" The bailiffs dragged her out, her voice echoing against the walls until the heavy doors closed and silence fell. Tears blurred my vision, not because of her words, but because I realized they no longer had power over me. For the first time, her poison could not reach me. The case made headlines across Denver. The story of the sick sister who poisoned her donor to seize the family estate captured public fascination, but for me it was not a spectacle. It was survival. Strangers wrote letters, some offering sympathy, others confessing their own stories of toxic families. Each message reminded me I was not alone, that others too had faced betrayal from those meant to protect them. In the quiet of my apartment, now safe from Olivia's reach, I sifted through those letters with trembling hands. Each one stitched a small piece of my spirit back together. One evening, Prosecutor Chavez visited me. She brought paperwork confirming that Olivia's claims to the estate were null, that my mother's house was legally mine now. She placed the file on my table and looked me in the eye. "You saved yourself, Rachel, and by bringing her down, you may have saved others she would have targeted next." Her words sank deep a balm to wounds I had long thought would never heal. Still, the nights were not easy. I woke sweating from dreams of Olivia's laughter, of my father's dismissive glare of the pen raised like a weapon in the law office. Trauma lingered like smoke after a fire, seeping into every breath. But in those moments, I whispered to myself the vow I had made. "You will not erase me." Each whisper pulled me back into the present, where I was still alive, still standing. My father tried to reach me once, leaving a message on my phone. He begged for forgiveness. His voice cracked with age and sorrow. I listened, my heart heavy, then deleted it. Some wounds cannot be mended by apologies. Some silences must remain. Justice had been served in the courtroom, but inside me it was still unfolding. Each day I chose to breathe, to eat, to walk outside into the sun was another verdict against the years of abuse. Olivia was behind bars, her mask stripped away. My father was left to face his reflection without illusions. And I, the daughter they had dismissed as weak, had survived. The scales had tipped not to erase the past, but to balance it. And as I stood in this garden of my mother's house, the soil beneath my feet warm with summer, I understood that justice was not just about punishment. It was about reclaiming the life they tried to steal. 6 months later, the house finally felt like mine. At first, every creak of the floorboards and every whisper of the wind through the hallways carried ghosts. I would wake at night expecting Olivia's footsteps or my father's bellow, but slowly those echoes faded, replaced by the softer rhythms of my own life. I tended the garden my mother once loved, pulling weeds, planting bright flowers, letting the earth stain my hands until the soil felt like an anchor rather than a grave. Each bloom that rose from the dirt reminded me that life could return even after years of neglect. One afternoon, Mr. Daniels stopped by with a bag of groceries. He had become more than just a neighbor. He was a steady presence, checking in, offering quiet companionship without demanding explanations. He would sit on the porch with me sipping coffee, telling stories from his firefighting days. He never pressed about the trial, never asked about the poison or the betrayals. He just listened when I chose to speak, and in his silence, I found a comfort I had never known in my own family. Sometimes I caught myself calling him the family I chose, and the words no longer stung. I joined a local support group for survivors of domestic and familial abuse. At first, I was afraid to speak, but when I finally told my story, voices around the circle murmured in recognition. Some had faced fists, others faced manipulation. Some had nearly been erased by those they trusted most. We were different, but the pain was the same. Sharing it lifted some of the weight, and listening to others reminded me that healing was not weakness, it was courage. I began volunteering with an organization that helped women escape toxic homes. The first time I held the hand of a trembling teenager who whispered that her stepfather told her she was worthless, I felt tears prick my eyes. I told her softly but firmly, "You are not worthless. You are worth everything." And as I spoke, I realized I was telling it to myself as much as to her. Nights were still hard. Some evenings I would sit in the quiet and hear Olivia's voice in my mind, sharp and cruel. "You will always be nothing." But then I would look around me at the walls that now held peace instead of fear, at the flowers in the garden, at the letters from strangers thanking me for sharing my story, and I would answer back, "I am something. I am someone. I survived." One evening, I walked to the edge of the yard where my mother used to sit. I whispered into the dusk, "This soil is mine, now free from poison." I imagined her smile, gentle and proud, and for the first time in years, I felt her presence not as a shadow of pain, but as a light guiding me forward. The court had granted me full ownership of the estate, but more than that, it had granted me freedom. Olivia would not walk out of prison for decades. My father had retreated into silence, too ashamed to face me again. The chains of obligation that once bound me to their cruelty had shattered. I was my own now. Sometimes I wondered if love was possible for me, real love that did not demand my silence or my sacrifice. I told myself I would not rush. Healing came first. But I knew this when I gave love. Again, it would not be because someone demanded it. It would be because I chose it. Standing in the garden that evening, the air cool against my skin, I thought about all the years I had spent believing survival was the same as living. Now I knew better. Survival was only the first step. Living meant planting roots, reaching toward the sun, choosing joy even after storms. I turned to the camera I had set up for my support group meeting the next day, and I spoke words I hoped would echo beyond me. Real family is not who shares your blood, but who protects your soul. I paused, letting the truth of it settle. Then I added, "If you are listening, and you have faced what I faced, know this: you are not alone. You are not worthless. And you can rise." I ended the recording and sat back, the silence of the house wrapping around me, no longer heavy, but full of possibility. For the first time in my life, the nightmare was over, and my real life, my own life, was just beginning.